for this virtual event. We're excited to have you with us. We really thought that this was just a timely conversation based on the fact that so many organizations have started to experience more of a flexible work culture, and not really due to the fact that, by choice, but just because of the circumstances surrounding COVID-19. That being said, I think that a lot of people have started to see some value in a flexible work culture. And now, as we're looking at that, how can we really implement that in a thoughtful way that's best for employees and also best for productivity for your organization? So that's really where this conversation has stemmed from. So I'm going to introduce Josh Cooper to you. Josh is going to give some background on the way in which his company has been able to kind of navigate this. His company was fully remote prior to this, so it is nothing new for him, but I think he can give us some solid strategies and ideas on how to start to implement this, whether it's something you're going to do within your organization or bring it back to your leadership, and hope to see that that worked out. So Josh Cooper is the CEO and co-founder of Whitelabel, a web development agency with its headquarters in downtown Toledo and a distributed team across the country. Josh was born and raised in Toledo, attending Sylvania Northview High School and the University of Toledo, both for undergrad and law school. Josh is a huge advocate for our region in downtown Toledo, specifically locating Whitelabel's headquarters on Adams Street in the heart of the Uptown neighborhood. In addition to running and growing his 7-year-old agency, Josh is a member of the EPIC Toledo Advisory Council, the TASPA board, and co-chair of the LLS Man and Woman of the Year event. Josh has been married to his lovely wife, Nagar, for nearly 9 years, and they have a 6-year-old son named Rasa and a 9-year-old daughter named Sarva. Josh has I'm sorry?
She's 9 months old. That would be growing up a little fast for me.
Okay.
Yes.
And Josh has the distinct pleasure of living in a multicultural and multi-generational home with their extended Iranian American family. So please welcome Josh. We're going to open this up to some conversation and dialogue afterwards. You're always welcome to either go off mute at that time, or you can put questions as we go along in your chat, and we'll read those out loud. So thank you, Josh, for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Great to be here, and thank you for inviting me to do this. So. As Sarah said, I run Whitelabel. So we're a web development agency located here in Toledo, but we do have a remote and distributed team around the country. Largely that was driven by just finding the best talent for what we do. And while we love to hire here and have as many local folks as possible to really be the best agency we could be, we ended up with a fragmented footprint. And we also ended up with just embracing people moving and saying, well, you can move and still work for us. So it's really been great, but very challenging, particularly in the first couple of years when maybe some of the softwares available weren't quite as ubiquitous. And we just had to learn to get good not working in the same room. And I think that's another huge challenge as you're adapting your company to this. So I've broken this into a couple major sections, but the beginning is going to really focus on, from a company's perspective, establishing a good remote culture. And then we're going to move into, at the end, like some pro tips about how to be a good remote employee, or just tips on working from home, because I know that's going to be relevant to a lot of the audience as well. So, but as Sarah alluded to, some of this is about building a remote culture. And I think globally, one of the biggest challenges in a remote culture is like having loyalty, right? It's one thing if you were always, people that worked in the office together. Now all of a sudden you're because of COVID-19, you're working from home and you kind of just, everybody already. But it's a whole other thing when you onboard an employee from another state who's halfway around the country who you've never met and who's never met anyone else on the team. And that's what we've done over the last couple of years. And we've been fortunate to have great retention, despite the fact that we don't get in the same room sometimes ever or very seldomly. So anyways, the first section I'm going to talk about here is what I call the boring essentials. I know that's a, riveting way to start a talk, but this is about a readable employee handbook. Employee handbooks are the things that everybody is like, the employee handbook, and they kind of scan it, and it's got a bunch of boilerplate and legal stuff in there. I love our lawyers. But, generally people tune them out. We named our handbook. We call it the path. And, we have interesting things in there that, and there's also the boring stuff, but we have interesting things in there that allow people to understand what our day-to-day looks like, who Whitelabel is, what we stand for. And I think that's really important. So number one, you should clearly articulate your company's values. Most legacy companies have pretty established values and have, statements already written out. For us, that was new in the last couple of years. We have 5 major values. I won't get into all of them, but the important thing is to craft policies that honor these values. It's one thing to have values in writing, but when it comes to, remote work in particular, how do your values align with your actions? How do they align with your day-to-day, life at your company? So your employees should know who you are and what the company stands for. And then, you should honor those values. So for example, one of our values is prioritize balance. And that reads, we believe all employees are entitled to pursue a healthy and fulfilling life outside of work. We honor this commitment through remote work and flexible schedules. We'll talk more about this later, but one of the things for us is we do have a defined workday in terms of when we agree to communicate with our employees. So we will not bother people on the nights and weekends unless it's an emergency. But we give people flexibility within that range. So it's 9 to 6, but you don't necessarily have to be at your desk from 9 to 6. You just have to be, accountable to your team or some of your employees during that time period. So we do allow for people to do, life when it comes up or when it's convenient, not just on the nights and weekends. And we'll talk more about that, but that's one of our values in prioritizing balance for our employees. Another really important thing when you have remote work is clearly stating employee expectations. So, this starts with something like detailed job descriptions. Most people have that, but there's so much that just happens at the office where like, hey, can you help with this? Or can we do that? When you're not there in an office, you're missing a lot, and you're missing context, you're missing small conversations. You really have to have people really have to have defined job descriptions, have an understanding of what they need to do, and have the tools to do it. And if they don't have that, you could have a lot of remote employees sitting around looking for work, and that's candidly chaos or bad management. It's going to make your organization really inefficient, and nobody wants that. Easier said than done. We have 20 employees right now. I realize it's a lot easier to manage that than thousands. That said, the groups with thousands have greater financial resources and legacy systems in place, and a lot of this is already handled. Another one is hourly expectations and daily schedule expectations. I just touched on this a little bit. So at Whitelabel, we call what we are semi-sync or semi-asynchronous. It depends which side you want to look at it. But so we do have, like I said, a workday of 9 to 6, but we only expect that you are accountable, quote, to your project team during that time. So you can absolutely schedule appointments, you can take breaks, you can live your life, so long as at the end of the week or the sprint for us, your work is done. So we're a web development agency. We work in 2-week sprints. And candidly, I don't really care when you did your work, so long as you're not holding up one of your coworkers, you're not holding up an account manager or project manager if they have questions or need information from you, and you get your work done and it's good and in a timely manner. In the last week, we had an employee, hey, I'm going to be out of the office. One of my neighbors, this guy lives in the country. My neighbor's got a swarm of bees and we're going to go get the bees. There's an opportunity right then to get bees and have honeybees for his family. And he went. And I have a couple employees living the van life. One has done it very successfully and done some traveling around the country while working for Whitelabel. I have another one aspiring to do it, to be young and not have kids. But anyways, he went to look at a van the other day. Like, sorry, I haven't gotten anything done yet this morning. I was looking at a van. And our employees are comfortable saying that because it's okay. We've clearly stated that's okay. We know that those people get their work done. They're accountable. So if you want to go look at a van because there's an opportunity to buy it or capture bees or go on a run or do something far more normal that, happens, doctor's appointments, kids things, we just embrace that. That's part of life. And, we account for that within our system, right? And every company's going to look a little different, but that's important to account for that. Or if that's not allowed, you have to clearly state that too. But I think one of the keys of remote work culture is, let's be realistic. Most people really have a hard time being productive for 8 consecutive hours in an office. I mean, I see a lot of you on Facebook during the day, and I'm there too. So let's, keep it real. Like, people are dozing off or like being distracted or whatever. And in remote work, rather than scrolling through Facebook, maybe you're going to go for a walk, get your head right. Maybe you're going to lift weights. You're going to do something different to recharge yourself. And that should be, in my opinion, I think companies should look to account for that and embrace that. And I think you'll ultimately have more productive workers if you do so. Let's see. And then I think, so number 1, clearly articulate company values. Number 2, clearly state employee expectations. Number 3, define and refine business processes. Okay, so first you have to start somewhere, right? And you're not going to get everything right the first time. I mean, the number of project management softwares we used at Whitelabel before we finally found one we were happy with, I had people early on just like, oh, here we go again. What's this one? Okay. And then we'd always find a reason it wasn't good enough or wouldn't work. It's really hard. I mean, there's thousands of softwares, SaaS, they call it software as a service out there. And many of them will do awesome stuff for a certain segment of your business, but seldomly are you going to find something that's like, I can run my whole business within this thing. So you end up marrying together a few different software products. We often sell and highly encourage people to buy custom development services when they want to take one software over here and make it communicate with this one through APIs. This is the little Whitelabel plug. So you maybe create a dashboard or a portal or some sort of app that is leveraging several of your softwares or moving all your data into a centralized location where, you can really have powerful business intelligence. So figuring out what those tools are is everything for remote work. Replacing in-office culture, it's not just about culture, it's about business process. And so many things are done by just getting in the conference room or getting on the whiteboard or, just conversations, things that come up, ideas that come up. So you have to foster an environment for that digitally. And that's hard. Things can be lost. People can miss each other. People can disrupt each other at bad times. So really having processes that are defined, and I can get into some specifics later that we use. But again, it's not going to necessarily be a one-for-one to your organization. So what sort of software tools do you use as a company? Do you have a company intranet? What apps is the company using? Are you willing, and then I would say this, be willing to innovate and change, but in a measured way. So you don't want to be just jumping from thing to thing. But, you also don't want to stay married to a software that's really bad and not serving you. So, and particularly in small companies, you have the power to innovate quickly and to change quickly. And that's what allows small companies to move to meet market demands and just be better, right? And sometimes, rise up and become big companies because they figured out how to do something, much better than larger competitors. So, I think, again, be willing to change, but you got to, and that's why I say this section is called define and refine business processes. All right, so that's section 1, the boring essentials, the handbook, values, expectations, business processes. Section 2, tools of the trade, I call this, and this is the right software at the right time. This is kind of the deeper dive into software, what we use, what are some tools that I feel are really essential for companies, at least in theory. It doesn't have to be these tools, but you're going to need these types of tools. So let's start with the basics. Email, calendar, document management. This is generally G Suite or Office 365 for most organizations. These are tools all of us are well familiar with at this point in our lives. We use G Suite, so I can speak more to that, but I think everybody's worked somewhere at some point that used whatever it was called at one point in time, Microsoft Office or 365, Office 365. So email, let's start with email. Email is obviously an extremely vital channel, but for us at Whitelabel, email is an external channel. We almost never communicate within our company from person to person using email. Because it's the dedicated external channel, we want to keep it clean. We want to keep it manageable. If your inbox is filled with 30 messages from clients or vendors or partners, and also 75 emails from your coworkers, I don't know how anybody can manage that. And you can have the tidiest OCD inbox imaginable, and you still are going to have a hard time keeping up because it's constantly coming, and it can be a source of distraction. It can prevent you from actually achieving your day-to-day tasks. And well, that's a whole nother topic about how do you segment your day. But for us, the way we handle this is email's external facing only. It's still the most common form of business communication in the world. Phone calls, obviously, right there as well. But if we were communicating things in email that were, pertinent to our operations, oof, man, I don't know if I would. I don't know if I'd want to work here. So we'll get to what we use, which is Slack. I'll give you the sneak peek, and we'll come back to Slack and tools like that, internal communication tools, shortly. But finishing up with the basics, email, calendars. Calendars are really important in remote work. When you're in an office, you look around, you see what people are doing. Oh, I see that, Kyle's over there talking to Christian, and they look to be talking about nothing. So I know I can go talk to Christian right now because he's there. I see him, he's laughing, he's not focused. In a remote culture, you have to always be mindful of who you're communicating to and what they may be doing at that given moment. So having an updated, accurate calendar is really important. Now, there's all sorts of different calendar protocols. If you just want to mark out of office, and without detail, that's kind of up to your company and how you do that. If I'm getting a haircut in the middle of the day, it says haircut on my schedule. I don't care if people know what I'm doing, but I am marking what I'm doing, when I'm available, when I'm not available. And my colleagues all have a lot of insight into my availability and their coworkers' availability. And that's really key for scheduling, but also for just being mindful of, interrupting other people's lives. So again, I think calendars, increased emphasis in remote work for sure. Document management's the third kind of prong I see, and these tools all have a million things you can do with G Suite and Office 365, but I think the main things are email, calendar, and document management. We use spreadsheets, obviously, for building like estimate sheets. We write proposals using Google Docs, and again, having a process for where docs live, a folder structure for things being organized, having the access squared away where the right people can see the right thing at the right time. Don't have to be disrupting somebody else and saying, hey, can you send me that document? It's like, it's already in that folder that you should have access to, and it's documented here. That stuff's really important because those little disruptions add up, and you just, and those little glitches where, oh, I asked you that question, but you've actually been out for the last hour. So I went to something else. And then when you answered the question, it was too late. And, I already got the answer from someone else. You're wasting people's time. You're wasting your own time. So again, those things are kind of the basics, but you got to get that right. You can't take the basics for granted and just say, yeah, we have email and we use email for everything. Good luck. That's not going to last very long. So the number one thing, if you take out of this talk, is you need a good internal communication tool. We use Slack. There's a million competitors, knockoffs. There's Microsoft Teams. I don't know as much about, but I know people like Teams a lot or are forced to use Teams. I'm not sure. It depends how you look at it. But, and for those of you not familiar with Slack, it's a $5 billion company. It's one of the fastest growing software companies in the last, 7 or 8 years. But I'll briefly describe it just so you know, which Slack is essentially a series of channels. It's a huge software you can open up. Oh, thank you, Siri. I'm not summoning you. So anyways, there's a bunch of channels, and the channels have topics. There's private groups, and then there's direct messaging. And it's essentially a giant chat board, but really nicely organized into specific topics. And it allows you to communicate in the correct place with the correct people about the right topic. So again, this is the answer to your email woes if you're doing everything in email. And so this for us is the center of our daily and regular communication. And it is key to a successful remote culture because Slack isn't just about work. It's also about celebrating people's birthdays or talking about the concert you just went to back when there were concerts. And, doing the things, that celebrate each other and get to know each other. We share funny GIFs and memes and, celebrate wins when we launch a project or overcome some challenging bug or, release a milestone with a client. So it's really important to have a place to do that. So for us, that's Slack. Again, it's a series of chat channels with different topics, different participations. It also has a lot of integration. So, other things can feed into Slack. So it becomes kind of your central ecosystem for what's going on day to day. It's the command center, if you will. And honestly, even for us, because we do have an office, we have a great office on Adams Street. And a lot of our folks come in. About half of our team lives in Northwest Ohio, and about half our team spread across the country. But if 2 or 3 people are in Northwest Ohio in the office at the same time, we still communicate in Slack. Like, we talk to each other, of course, but we still communicate in Slack because somebody on that team is maybe not in the office. And Slack also becomes a catalog of conversations, past and future, about a topic. So you may end up scrolling back in one of the channels in Slack and saying, hey, on May 16th, we said this, like, we need to follow through on that, right? So it creates some sort of record. Now, that said, it's not the be all and end all, but we'll come back to that real quick. A few more minor things on Slack, because again, this is Slack or something like it. And there's like Fleep and Bloop and Blop. I don't know. Those might be story bots, or they might be names of real startups. I'm not sure, when watching a lot of cartoons with my kids. But anyways, we have groups for management discussions. We have groups for like project-centric stuff. So every single one of our clients has a Slack channel named after that client. And if we're talking about that client's project, that it's going to be in that Slack channel, not in some general discussion that's not pertinent to everybody else. We also have topical channels, like for us, like design, development, security, that are just where we share ideas, thought leadership, articles, best practices, principles, things like that, that allow us to evolve and get better, but in a specific way. Again, you don't want everything to just be in the general channel and it becomes chaos. So you want to think through Slack, organize it in a way where people in your organization can communicate and, and ultimately have the right information in the right place accessible all the time. Wait, I'm getting a chat, so let me just see. Let's see. Did we talk about managing non-exempt? Okay, so anyways, I don't know if I can run with that thread right now and multitask that well. So here's the other key thing in Slack. It can be a passive or an active channel. So it has the tagging functionality, the @ like you would direct message someone on Twitter, and it also has like @channel. So if you say @channel and then you make an announcement, it is going to send a push notification to everybody in your organization across their mobile device, their desktop, whatever they have activated. And you can get really tricky with managing notification settings, but it's really the equivalent of yelling. Like, it's like, hey, everyone, this is an important thing. So if you use @channel and you just blurt something out, it should be really relevant. You can also then say a specific person when you need to get their attention, and you can also send somebody a direct message if it's not meant for the ears of a larger audience. So again, establishing really good Slack protocols is on the company, and then using it right is on the employee. And it's really so important for those two things to marry. If all the information's in the right place, it's an incredibly powerful tool. And again, it keeps your inbox clean. I could do 2 hours on Slack, so I'm going to cut it off because, and let the siren go by. I work on a 3-season patio. We'll talk about remote offices when it's nice. I'm here today, but we'll get back to that. So excuse the noise. Okay. So life beyond Slack. Let's talk about that, because it's not good for everything. It is not a panacea. So this is really going to be customized for your business, right? So while Slack is great for communication, it's not the ideal place for storage of important information in the long run, nor is it a project management tool unless you like chaos. So for us, we use what are called Kanban boards. Many of you are probably familiar with them. We use Trello for management style stuff, and we use GitHub for development specific Kanban boards. Kanban boards are, kind of those boards you see where there's columns and cards and you can move them left to right as things move through a project life cycle. Cards can have incredible amounts of detail in them. They can have links, they can have documents attached to them. You need a good project management tool. Again, Trello is a great one. There's one called Monday. I mean, there's a million project management tools. You got to look at what works for your organization, but you do a Google search, project management tools for X industry, or, just project management tools, you'll find a lot. This is maybe as important or more important than Slack. I mean, the talk's largely about building a remote culture, but business processes are part of building remote culture. Culture is not just, hey, it's everybody's so cool, we like each other, you know, we all listen to the same music. I mean, nobody listens to the same music anymore, so you don't even have that. But, you know, culture is about setting expectations for your employees, them knowing what their job is, being able to get their job done, and then go do their life and not be like, man, I don't know where anything is. This sucks. I'm, you know, frustrated. I can't even do my work. You know, that's a bad culture. You do not want people not able to get to their work. People want to do their work. They want to do it efficiently. They want to get on with their day, their life, you know, whatever. So it is really important to have a good project management tool to accompany something like Slack, to make sure you are not trying to use Slack and or email as the place where you access all your information. You should be able to open up a board, see what your tasks are for the day or for the week, have a nice organized conversation over here, and boom, you're off and running. Good meeting cadence is important to that too, but again, overdoing meetings is just as problematic as anything else. Okay, trying to be mindful of time. So again, we use Trello boards, Trello, Trello. That's a really good one. It just got bought by Atlassian. And then beyond that, we use something called Harvest for time tracking and invoicing. Again, there's a million tools for this. Time tracking, maybe all organizations don't do it. Some probably do. It's more important than others. For us, time tracking is really key because it's, you know, how we bill clients too, right? So we one of our other values that we didn't talk about is honesty and integrity, but we are like all about transparency. We see that as where the now is, and it's certainly where the future is going to be. So we have great software that allows us to be transparent with our clients. So if something was particularly challenging, they can see the detail of what we worked on. And it's really all part of a larger mission of educating our clients and helping them understand tech, right? Because web development, app development, you know, machine learning, some of the things we do, they're esoteric concepts still to many people. They know it exists. They just, oh, the computer programmers just figure it out. That's great. And that was a nice explanation in 2010, but people need to understand how software works and how computer programming works, because it is here for the long run. And the more organizations understand it and harness the power of it and leverage it for their organizations, those are the organizations that will succeed, dare I say survive, and, you know, thrive in the future. So again, we're all about being transparent, and using powerful software tools enable that for us, but also make our employees happy. It's a win-win all around. So again, we use Harvest for time tracking. We have a bunch of little things we use because we do software development. We have a really good password management tool we use, you know, to make sure nobody's we're passing credentials to somebody's website on an insecure channel. I mean, VPNs are very important for remote workers. There's a lot of things we can get into that are centric to us. Specific questions we can get to later, but the overarching theme here is you really have to have a good software suite that you're using, and or be building something custom. And this is what we do. So another plug for us. You know, we build a lot of custom portals. We build databases and then interfaces on those databases to empower employees to do the work they need to do and allow them to be remote or anywhere in the world, or travel, or sometimes remote, sometimes in the office. You know, this era has been here for a while. I think it just went on, you know, into hyperdrive, so to speak, when COVID hit. But companies really need to be thinking about this and look for softwares that have open APIs. We really are big into open source. An API is an application programming interface. If that allows you to take the data from that software and marry it with data from other places and really have powerful business intelligence. And, you know, we're fortunate because we're software developers, we hire ourselves to build some really compelling data and to make processes more efficient. That's could be a whole nother talk, but it's so important because it, again, allows people to enjoy their jobs and allows companies to be efficient and to, you know, monitor employee productivity and activity without being Big Brother, right? There's a tricky line you have to walk there. We don't want to employ people doing nothing. That's not good for anybody at our company or for our clients. We also don't want to be micromanaging every 2 seconds of your day. And, oh, I saw you were signed off at 11:17. That's not the lunch break. Like, that's insane too. So finding that, you know, happy medium is really important. And all these things kind of play together to make a good remote culture. Okay, so You thought I was done with software, but we haven't talked about the most important one. Let's talk about conference calls, because we're all on one now. Zoom has been all the rage. And I think there's a few really key things here. First of all, Zoom is great. WebEx is pretty great. You know, a lot of them are great. There's a ton of fairly reliable video conferencing services out there. And video conferencing is really important to building a remote culture. There's no question. Seeing each other is more vital than ever. Many people are feeling socially isolated. Extroverts like me are just bored. Like, we miss people. I miss you all, even the people I don't know here. I would love to hang out with you on Adam Street soon. But video conferencing is not everything either. Screen fatigue is very real. Having to get ready for every meeting and feel like you have to do your hair and light the room right. It's great for client-facing calls. It's great for team building type activities, social hours. And it can be great for regular day-to-day meetings, but you got to find your own groove there as a company and pattern. And you do not use Zoom as a catch-all. It is also not a good place to log information. Yeah, you can record Zoom calls. Have fun going back and listening to all your Zoom calls. Like, it's not the place to store information. It's worse than email and Slack because it's not even written. It's just said, and you know, you'll run out of storage quickly if you're trying to save all these calls. So, you know, it's awesome. It's more important than ever, I think, to have video calls. And when I get down to the, you know, tips for working from home, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But going back to the phone call, you know, putting your headset in and getting away from the computer is just as powerful. I guarantee there's at least 3 people out here multitasking right now, kind of paying attention to me, but doing something else. And you should be, if that's, you know, it's totally cool. I'm not, you know, I'm just giving a talk. But that happens in meetings all the time. You're sitting there on a Zoom and you're like forced to be sitting here staring, you know. I've seen people create loops of themselves and nod occasionally. That's interesting. But, you know, the challenge is I'm 40. My eyesight has always been pretty good. I'm getting screen fatigue between staring at this thing, you know, too much, and staring at this thing. And now I'm in video calls. I'm done. I'm tired of looking at the screen. So if I don't have to take notes and I don't have to be on my computer, I have a rule of taking as many calls as possible on my mobile device and getting up, walking away from my home desk. This time of year, especially being out in the yard, I pick up sticks while I'm on calls. I go for walks around the neighborhood. I, you know, do whatever. Somebody at Whitelabel, and I'll read these later, they fold laundry during their calls. Like, multitask, that's okay. This is your time to do it, because the key is this. Most of the time, you're more focused if you're not on your computer. Your computer is just a never-ending source of distraction. And most people are distracted by it. Let's be honest. You got 16 tabs open. Somebody hits you with a DM, you know, or a text message, and you're gone. You're off into that land. Oh, okay, back. Could you repeat that question? Sorry, I was, you know, not paying attention. So if you're walking and talking, you're more likely to be paying attention. So that's kind of my quick on, you know, Zoom. Everything should not be a Zoom. I see I'm powering through the time. Again, I'm quite verbose. So let me jump down to the final section. I'll try to be quick so we have time for questions. You know, as a work from home employee, so you don't run a business, you don't get to set all these policies, and you're saying, that was great, Josh, but you know, I'm stuck in this ecosystem where I work and we haven't implemented any of that stuff. So I'm going to try to get them to implement it, but I just need to focus on being a good work from home employee. Creating a home office, number 1. Ideally, it's a dedicated space, you know, at least as a primary office, although a few alternative spots can be useful for curbing boredom and mixing it up a bit, you know, especially those of you who are extroverts who miss people, you know, coffee shops occasionally when, you know, so long as you're social distancing and all that stuff. So, you know, people work from airports, we've had people at Whitelabel work from vans with hotspots. It's great. I think creating a dedicated space is ideal, but you have to do what works for you. If no space is available, establish some routines at least. Like, you know, put your computer away or your files or whatever, and then get them out. Don't leave them out. Like, you have to have some sort of thing you've done that signifies going to work. For some people, that's still getting up and showering and putting on nice clothes. Like, one of my colleagues, who herself often works in her pajamas, sometimes, dresses, whatever. Her husband puts on a shirt and tie every day and has for 7 years. He gets up, he showers, he puts on a shirt and tie, and he works remote. And he's done it for 7 years, and they work in the same house. And, you've got to do you. And if that's going to help you get into the mode of work, if you've got to get up and drive around the block and pull back in your garage, I don't know, whatever works for you. But find a routine that separates work from home. The most dangerous thing, and I am terribly guilty of this being a business owner and someone who started a company and always feels that pull to be doing more, and we could be further than this at this point, is blurring the lines. You start to blur the lines of home life and work life. There's some beauty in it, and there's some times where it's like, oh man, I got ahead on a Sunday, or I caught up at night, or I got ahead at night, and that's okay. Do some of that, but be really careful to not just have it be this one monotonous existence of, kind of with your kids, kind of working, kind of doing neither very well because you're always just in this funk of quasi work. That's really the worst case scenario. And that's the real pitfall of work from home life that you got to be careful. So whatever works for you, look to establish either routines, get out, co-work with somebody off site, somebody in your social circle, and let's not pretend like COVID's going to happen forever. Like, you can, but remote work probably will, right? It's going to outlast COVID, and many companies are going to say, hey, this was kind of nice. We reduced our costs and we reduced our environmental impact, and people were just as productive or more productive, or, they didn't have to commute. So it saved them 2 hours a day. So this is going to last past this era. And, working with a coworker, we had before this, what was called the Mitten Meetup. We have 4 employees in Michigan, and they get together sometimes at each other's houses, sometimes at coffee shops, wherever. And they have their little group within Whitelabel. And I've been up to some Mitten Meetups because I'm an extrovert and I need to get out of the house and I like doing new things. So I love going up there. So again, creating a home office was part of that, and then routines is the other part. We talked about this before. For Whitelabel, we're semi-synchronous. So I recognize I cannot sit here for 8 hours and work. That's insanity. I can't focus that long. Most people can't, and you're pretending you are when you're at work. Embrace that. Do some work, get up, exercise. Do something to get yourself a break and to rest your legs and rest your head, and then get back in it. But find those routines that work for you, and take advantage of the flexibility if your company lends it. You'll save a lot of time. Grocery shopping at Tuesday at 10 a.m. is great. Saturday morning, Home Depot's a line out the door. Wednesday morning, Home Depot, Wednesday at 1 p.m., nothing's really going on. So if you have flexibility, take advantage of that. Okay, I want to give time for questions. So let me say the last major thing here, and then I'll read a few quotes. Communication is everything. This is really the most important thing with across the board, from the company to the employees and the employees back to the company. Use the proper channels, use the software at your company, follow the rules discussed above, but it's generally better to over communicate and to be direct. You don't imply things. Sarcasm's hard, wittiness is hard. Maybe they should create like a witty font or like a sarcasm font so people know when you're kidding. Just be direct. Try to state things as succinctly and plainly as you can. You've got to think about your reader, and this is a new world, and hard for many of us. Again, if you're in a mixed culture where some of you are at office and some of you are remote, be mindful of the remote employees. This is really hard. We have some events at Whitelabel, and I always feel for our employees that are in Colorado or New York who aren't there, and try to be mindful of how that's going to make them feel when they see our Instagram of us, drinking beer and going to a Mud Hens game, or drinking beer outside the Mud Hens game, whatever. And then finally, just as part of the communication, muting is, the new drinking game. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I was muted, or I was unmuted, just as important. Having some good equipment, a good headset, being mindful of muting. You don't want to be the person who flushed the toilet in the Supreme Court decision. You don't want, it's important to know when to mute. And it's also important if you just talked and nobody responded, oh, yeah, I was muted. So, communication is you have to be active, you have to buy in. And if you want to make remote work, if you love it and you really want to make it work, be a great communicator. because that is going to make your company more likely to embrace it. It's going to make it work. And it ultimately has to work for more companies to stick with it and go with it. So yeah, anyways, no big giant wrap up. I actually think I'll read some things, Sarah, given time, but
Yeah.
let's let people ask questions first to
Okay,
make sure.
great. Well, I know Desmond has the first one. So Desmond, I'm going to take you. Oh, I lost Desmond. No, he's right there. Okay.
Yeah, do you still have PTO with the
He's
semi-sync?
going to ask you, and then I'll read some of the others that came through. Nice, Desmond. I like the background. All right. All right.
I figured I should really jazz up my background considering our earlier conversation. But Josh, I have two questions for you. First question is, when you have people who are working remotely, is it your responsibility or the employee's responsibility to make sure their internet is fast enough?
Interesting. Probably both. I think that's on an individual company level. I think, it's tricky because a lot of people have experienced no issues with internet at all, and then all of a sudden have in the last 10 weeks, right? So I think equipment, we provide everybody a Mac, a really nice MacBook and all the software they need and everything. But that really is probably on the individual company level. I would say if, you are forcing employees to work from home, then that probably merits a conversation about what are you going to do to compensate them for that. Although I've not yet met the person who's like, hey, I don't have internet, so can you get it for me? Particularly people with, we're web developers, right? So like everybody has blazing fast internet already because they like this stuff. And it's what they're doing off. Second question?
Second question is, how do you actually have PTO at Whitelabel? And if so, how does that function within the semi-sync work culture?
Yeah, absolutely. We have all the same. I mean, we have paid vacation time, sick leave, company holidays. We even have some bonus holidays. We try to be a really progressive culture in that way. We have what's called spring break and summer break. We have like just 2 4-day weekends where detached from traditional holidays, where people can do what they love, not necessarily what the ritual is of the holiday. So yeah, absolutely. That's, at the end of the day, our people are accountable to working a certain given number of hours in a 2-week period, more or less, or in a week period, and getting their work done. Within those constraints, we don't really constrain beyond that. Like if you want to work 4 hours one day and 12 the next, you can do that. We do have some people at Whitelabel who, not every week, but like often. And if I read some of these things, which I should do because they're really good, we had one guy for a while was almost done by Friday at noon every week because he had hit his billable requirement for the week, and he loved to get his weekend started Friday at noon. So we completely embrace that. And, again, it's more challenging in certain roles where there's an expectation that you're going to answer the phone at 4 o'clock because maybe a client calls, you're a lawyer, I don't know, But for us, most of us, I see Emily here in the chat thread and think Emily would have a lot harder time not being around Friday at 4 because she's very client facing. But for many of our developer employees in particular, they have a lot of autonomy over when they work.
Awesome.
And
thanks very much.
Absolutely have PTO. There's, it's so important too. I'm glad you brought that up because companies really have to respect people's personal space and time. They should not use this as a license to always work. That will drive people crazy, and it's candidly unfair. It's not what's right for people's lives, for their mental health. So we have rules beyond 6 o'clock. We are committed to not communicating general messages with the team unless it's an emergency, and those are very seldom.
So you're not sending crazy emails at 4 a.m. just because you're up?
Correct. You can schedule those if you want to do that, because I am up sometimes at weird hours with either crying babies or thoughts I can't get rid of. But yeah, you can schedule that. There's tools for that to, make the email go out at the start of the workday. Other questions?
I think that plays into another question that was brought up from Rebecca. She said she thought it might be helpful to talk about managing non-exempt employees and concerns with their remote work.
Non-exempt employees. What does that mean?
I think that is looking at like hourly Is
Oh,
that?
hourly employees. Yeah, sorry, I'm not into the legal speak.
Let me
Yeah,
make
I
sure.
mean, so in terms of managing hourly employees, I guess, what's the question specifically? Somebody, because really it's the same for us. I mean, like letting them work overtime. Okay, so wait, hourly versus salary,
Yeah.
non-exempt. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so again, for us, like we just have expectations and then we have a clear what happens if you exceed, right? So we do have a bonus structure in place for people who work overtime. We have defined what it means, what is the required hours to work in a given year, and then what happens if you work more than that. So we kind of have like all the rules that work for us that were signed off on by our lawyer, but I'm not sure I can provide much here in terms of like differences. Like we have of our 20 folks right now, only one of them is hourly because of school, and because of school, he is not full time, right? So but we honor all the same rules regarding like health insurance and benefits. Like you have to be, full time to have benefits and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Christian asks, with companies that fall into the structured workday of 8 to 5 with the usual, lunch break from noon to 1 and aspire to transition to a more flexible workday, do you recommend, starting that off with a slow transition, a rip off the Band-Aid in between the two? And then are there any recommendations to gain the team's collective buy-in?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think I do think slow is probably the way to go. Trying to go from like a synchronized culture to a fully asynchronized culture is going to be chaos and really hard. Asynchronous is really hard no matter what. We have a consultant we work with in Italy, and he's 6 hours off from us, and that's challenging sometimes. We've kind of figured that pattern out. We have 2 employees in Colorado. They're 2 hours behind us. We have 2 in Illinois. They're 1 hour behind us. And then the rest of us are all in the Eastern time zone. So we already have some of that, challenge of dealing with employees around the country. What we did originally is we have the defined workday as 9 to 6 Eastern Standard Time, but you're not expected to be tethered to your desk that whole time. Like we prefer that people work a majority of their hours in there, like let's say 6 or 7 hours within that window. But really, it's just about being accountable within that window and not blocking someone else. So if you do something that somebody else relies on, it's going to be a little bit different than if you're off on an island and you can just kind of do your own thing. But yeah, so we do 9 to 6 and then say, but some people get up and start working at 7 all the time and they're out by 4, and that's fine too, because we allow for at least 2 hours of deviation from that in either direction. And candidly, that's just what the manual says. Like projects find their own pattern and teams find their own pattern. So for us, like our web development groups, we're usually looking at probably somewhere between a 2 and 4 person team working on a given project. And that team's going to establish their own rhythm. They're going to have maybe a daily stand-up where they align in the morning. They're going to have a sprint review where they review what happened over the last 2 weeks, and then a sprint planning. But then they start to kind of develop their own schedule. So I think you need to have a flexible enough global system that the smaller groups within that can have the flexibility they need to do their work. And that's a kind of a vague answer, but Christian's situation is going to be different than Rebecca's. It's going to be different than Desmond's. Every company is a little different. So I think having enough flexibility, but also enough teeth to make sure it's not just chaos. And what that looks like is going to be a little different to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Other
Awesome. I do want to mention, I did put a link to a Gallup article in the chat as well, because I think that Josh has given a really great outline about, some steps that organizations can take, things that you can present, how you kind of move forward on this. But I know that a lot of our organization leads, right, our leaders are looking for what is the data backup of a lot of that. And so whenever I need the people case for anything, I go to Gallup, and they give me the research background about why this is so important to your organization, what value can it bring, and even how you can, it can help to retain and attract employees as well. So,
Perfect.
I just wanted to add that.
I'm going to read just a couple quotes from some folks at Whitelabel because I think these are really relevant. It's people who have worked remote for years for us. I'm going to let the sirens go by again. Sylvania Avenue, thank you. Okay, so quote, I love remote work and folding laundry while I'm in a meeting, but beware the workday bleeding into evenings. Pre-pandemic, having plans with friends in the evening, playing a team sport, etc., helped me ensure a strict cutoff time for work. This was helpful on days where I could have just as easily kept working long past when I would have in an office, which then I do succumb to it. It leads to burnout. So, quote, having a designated workspace and learning to take short breaks in between works for me. Another point which counters my first point is working from the same spot all day can be boring. So learning to work from different locations like coffee shop, airport, etc., makes remote work fun. Some tips from Miss Emily here. Have a good headset. Have a reliable connection or a way to connect via both phone and web. Set guidelines with family members, roommates, etc., that share your workspace. Have some concept of mentally commuting after I wrap my day. That seems, I know for sure when I close my computer, I'm probably going to open it up again after my kids go to bed, but at least I'm like, all right, I'm out till the kids are in bed, right? And I tell somebody that. Take advantage of it. Don't be so strict with your schedule of 9 to 5. You're allowed to be if you're allowed to be flexible, take a run on midday Wednesday, find a cool new work environment, work from an unfamiliar place. Okay, so this is one that's really good, I think. Seems small, but the time saved that would have previously been spent on getting ready for work, commuting to and from an office and packing a lunch, snacks, coffee, whatever, maybe I eat too much, has gone towards time I spend on myself, more time to exercise, maybe in the morning before work, cook better food, take time away from my computer, and has been really great for preventing day-to-day burnout. And then finally, the scheduling this was also a really good one. This employee lives in Colorado, so let's try not to be too jealous of like being able to just go for a hike in the mountains in the middle of your workday, but quote, the schedule flexibility is huge for me. I definitely think it makes me more productive. For a specific example, working 8 hours straight and expecting to be productive the entire time seems like an unreasonable ask for anyone. But I really feel the need to take breaks frequently and just go for a walk or disconnect from what I'm working on for a while, then get back to it. So at a traditional job where I might be either taking those breaks during paid time or trying to push myself through unproductive territory, I can pause my timer, go for a half-hour walk, come back refreshed, and resume the timer just as productive as I was before. Being able to take those breaks whenever my brain needs it and building my schedule around that helps a ton. And then finally, here are a few other things I've noticed that have been nice or helped me in either my work or personal life. Being able to average out my hours and spread them out flexibly makes it so I can go camping on Friday early afternoon instead of evening or Saturday morning. Go on a hike on a Tuesday morning instead of a Saturday. Seems small, but it's huge for stress relief and mental health. And then this person's a parent, which I think is another thing I didn't have a chance to get into, but is a whole nother thing, particularly with kids home. He said, life with a 2-year-old can be unpredictable. Remote work and schedule flexibility makes it so that I don't ever have to choose between work and taking care of my son, which is amazing both for my relationship with him and with my wife. I think that's really important, and that's the last thing I'll end on. Because, there's a lot of value in this for companies to implement a semi-async or a semi-sync culture, because it is really nice to be present and home with your children. And companies have to recognize you cannot tell your 5-year-old to not come in for the next 8 hours. It's just not happening. So you got to really think about how you make that work, both on the individual level and at the company level. And, ultimately, if you succeed at it, we have really happy people. And that's how, here's your conclusion. You build a good culture. You have to have happy people to build a good culture. And you have to have good policies and clear, knowing what to do, clear communication protocols in order to have happy people. And, in the end, I think everybody's just going to look a little different and every company's a little different, but that's, kind of what's worked for us. And I'll stop talking because I'm at my time limit.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Josh. Do we have?
Go
I
ahead.
will
Yeah.
absolutely do follow-up questions. I can stay on for 5 more minutes or 10. I have another meeting at 1:30. If anybody else does want to ask something specifically or get into something, and I'm also, Sarah, you can provide my contact information for anybody who follows up and asks questions.
Absolutely. I will put your email in the comment section as well.
Perfect. It's already in every database in America, it feels like. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all coming.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Josh, for joining us and hosting this. I think we had a great time. We definitely learned a lot, and I think it's really been valuable for everyone. Upcoming EPIC events, just to let you know, we do have golf lessons starting Wednesdays. The first Wednesday is tomorrow night. If you're interested, please check out our Facebook or our weekly email that has contact information on how you can sign up for those with the golf pro Dan Sutton at Heather Downs. And then we also have a fun little event this coming Saturday, June 20th from 4 to 6 p.m. It is going to be tennis lessons. So it's a great way to get some activity in, meet up with some EPIC members, and still maintain some social distancing while outside. So if you've been interested in brushing up that skill or wanted to pick up a racket, this would be a great opportunity. Again, you can check out our social media for all of that information. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to head out if there's no more questions.